You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. We are witnessing one of the more remarkable about faces that any of us could imagine. From what LSU's defense was a season ago to what they are right now, and I'll grant you they are just 7 games into this season. There are still 5 to play. There are 5 Southeastern Conference games. One of them is on the road this week at Texas A&M. They still have to play Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. You all know that by now. But remember what this team was a season ago. Not that you need me to remind you, but this was a team that was 86th in the country in scoring defense. They were 108th in passing defense. They were a defense that, quite honestly, it was so sad that it became comical how bad they were. Last year, after LSU's abomination against Ole Miss, where they gave up 55 points and a record 706 yards, the next week, T-Bob and I are at Don Juan Cigar Bar for the game for whiskey and wine. And remember, mind you, that's when LSU had hired Pete Jenkins, who is the greatest defensive line coach ever. But anytime the LSU defenders made a tackle, any positive play, the entire bar erupted into a sarcastic Pete chant. That's how bad it was. It was so bad it was comical. And you turn the page to what this defense is right now, and I will grant you again that we are looking at still a little more than half a season. And a little more than half a season that also included games against an FCS opponent, Nichols, and a G5 opponent in South Alabama, and 2 Big Ten opponents who are pretty hapless right now in Southern Cal and UCLA. But you also went on the road and played South Carolina, who keeps looking better and better. You played Ole Miss, who at one point certainly was considered one of the best offenses in college football, and you went on the road and you played Arkansas this weekend that was averaging just under 200 rush yards per game. It was one of the better offenses in the conference. And at this point, you look up and you see this LSU defense that right now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but LSU right now is 67th in total defense. Now, I'm not telling you need to throw a ticker tape parade because LSU is 67th in total defense. But what's even more impressive is they're 33rd in rush defense. Let me say that again for you. LSU, the team that many people criticize because of the long touchdown runs against South Carolina, Nichols, last 2 weeks ago, the 50-yarder against Ole Miss. A defense that on the interior was so thin, the head coach openly acknowledged the spot they were going to go address in the transfer portal was defensive tackle. Not only did you miss on the big names, but the one guy you had returning that you felt really good about ruptured his Achilles and is out for the season. That run defense is 33rd in the country. Again, I'm not telling you this is a suffocating defense when Nick Saban had Alabama rolling or what Kirby and George has been at times, or even some of those great Clemson teams. That's good enough to win. But most importantly, and we lose sight of this sometimes because people get hyper-focused on what's your total defense number, what's your rush defense number, what's your pass efficiency defense, what's your exponential metric to the quantum physics, all this advanced metrics. I don't care. You know what I care about? Points. Because at the end of the game, nobody's looking at the yardstick. Oh, that can help tell the story of the game. But everybody's looking at the scoreboard. Doesn't matter if you outgained someone and you had 10 more minutes of time possession. If they outscored you, you lose. Points are what matters. And LSU defense right now is tied for 35th in the country in scoring defense. They're allowing 20.5 points per game. That defense a year ago, LSU is playing for a national championship. They're in the playoff and might win it because nobody could stop them. So how has Blake Baker done it? In a relatively short amount of time and without going ham in the portal. Let me remind you. I mean, where are your great portal additions? Gio Paez has been a starter for you, and he's been a solid player, if not spectacular, but solid player. And you had a JVR Suggs who's really a rotational guy. Where else are your additions? I mean, Jordan Gilbert is starting for you at safety. That has been a good addition. He's not an All-American, not even an All-Conference player, but he's been a good player. So how have you so dramatically changed your defense from quite literally the worst defense in the history of the program a year ago to one that's not only competent, but getting good? Brian Kelly was asked what Blake Baker's done. Listen to what he said.
I think as it relates to Blake and the linebacker room, clearly there's a connection there through belief, trust, and, the ability to, build relationships with the players that kind of fosters that, right? And relationships require time, and Blake puts in the time with them. He's around the building all the time. During the summer, he's around here. I mean, he takes the time to be around the players, and that's the only way you can build relationships with them. You can't just show up on Saturday and go, hey, I'd like you to do these things for me. So I think it's the time that he puts in, and because of that, he has built really good relationships, and a lot of it on trust.
Brian Kelly, in a 40-second soundbite there when talking about what Blake Baker's been able to do to turn around the defense. You know what you didn't hear? You didn't hear, we got better personnel. You know what you didn't hear? You didn't hear X's and O's. You didn't hear coverage, schemes, exotic blitz packages. You didn't hear any of that. You know what you heard? Blake Baker is taking the time to get to know his players. That's what you heard. Is it really that simple? It might be. Jacob Verdon posted this video on Twitter after one of the home games earlier this year. I think this was the South Alabama game. It's Major Burns on the field after the game, high-fiving Blake Baker's kids. Pull that full screen, Paul. Hugging his daughters, hugging his wife, hugging Blake Baker. Like, clearly, there is a relationship there. Let me contrast this to the video that Jacques Doucet took on the field at the bowl game a year ago, where Matt House is trying to dap up the defensive lineman, and Mekhi Wingo won't even look at him. Won't even look at him. Won't even acknowledge him. There's no relationship there. I don't think Brian Kelly, by the way, was taking a shot at Matt House. At least not directly. But in explaining the turnaround the way he did, he was explaining what is there now and what clearly wasn't there before. There's enough context clues. I mean, did you see Jamar Cain's tweet after? Remember Jamar Cain? Jamar Cain, the former LSU defensive line coach, who's now the defensive line coach with the Denver Broncos. After the Broncos beat the Saints, he went and quote tweeted the Broncos win tweet and said, "Guess I can coach in this state. House emoji equals clown, IYKYK. If you know, you know." Taking a direct shot at Matt House. Now, I don't think Jamar Cain should have done that. I think that's, for an adult in the room, doesn't need to happen. But look who the first reply was on that tweet. It was Mekhi Wingo with a laughing face emoji and said, "Dog." Doesn't this tell you everything you need to know about what was happening defensively a year ago and why Blake Baker has been so effective at changing it? Yes, scheme is part of it, but y'all, Major Burns was on this team a year ago. Sage Ryan was on this team a year ago. Zy Alexander was here a year ago. Savion Jones, Whit Weeks, Wes Weeks, Greg Penn, Braden Swinson, they were all here a year ago. All these guys. And now all of a sudden you go from the worst defense ever to a defense that is more than competitive? Why is that? Because you got a guy who's your defensive coordinator. I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. I'm telling you what the head coach told all of us. I'm not piecing together context clues now all the stuff as it relates to Matt House I am. But Brian Kelly told you point blank. Hard to just show up on a Saturday and expect these guys to go play for you. Blake Baker's taking the time to get to know him. He cares about him. They know it. And so they play hard for him. All the same guys of a year ago. How are the same group of players performing exponentially better than they did a season ago? Because they believe in this guy, they trust this guy, they know this guy has their back. I don't know what the ceiling is for this defense because physically there's still some limitations. You don't have, Braden Swinson is playing awesome this year, but I don't think you have an All-American on your defensive front. Whit Weeks is playing like an All-American. There's some limitations and some depth issues at linebacker after that. You don't have a true lockdown corner, although Zay Alexander's playing well, but everybody's picking on Ashton Stamps. And I think Jordan Gilbert and Sage Ryan are good safeties. They're good safeties, but I don't think either's an all-conference caliber player. So you got limitations. And the cavalry is on the way as far as talent. But the whole of this defense is greater than the sum of its parts. They are playing. Remember I told you that in fall camp? That was my big takeaway about this defense in fall camp. I said it over and over. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. There's no superstar on that defense. Now, we could have made an argument for Harold Perkins, but he's been injured, unfortunately. But they're playing together, and they are elevating because of it. We saw it in fall camp, and they keep getting better right now. We'll continue to see how much better they can get throughout the course of the final 5 games of the season over the final 6 weeks to see what they might be playing for come December. But whatever it is, it started with Blake Baker actually caring about these players and investing in them this summer. You don't have to take my word for it. The head coach just told you point blank. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.